Welcome to Every Friday with Dan and Olivia. I'm Dan Miles.
And I'm Olivia Darbo. Hello.
Yeah, so last week we had Olivia without Dan. A week before we had Dan without Olivia. So this week we finally got it right.
That we did.
How's your toe?
Still hurts. It's still a little bruised. It's an adjustment to say the least, but I still have it. It's not, it hasn't been chopped off or anything. There's always somebody worse off than you, my mom used to say.
Honestly, I don't want to bring up a painful topic. I'm not even asking for myself. Last time you and I were on the show together, we had spoken about your toe. For the listener's sake, I thought I would mention it so I don't seem like an insensitive jerk. And you've told us it still hurts, and let's just not talk about it anymore.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's it's actually the first thing I've ever broke. I have still to this day never broken anything until recently with my pinky toe. And the smaller the toe doesn't necessarily mean the less it hurts. And then I've also never had a nosebleed my entire life.
You've never had a nosebleed. That's interesting. Not a broken bone, I get. I haven't either. And I really, really wanted to play football when I was a kid. And my dad would quote me the statistics of how many high school football players get broken bones. And I was like, well, good. Then I'll just have a cast and a jersey and get a sympathy date. I don't know.
Yes, definitely. Somebody who's gives you sympathy for your blood.
I can't play, but I am technically on the team, so it still counts.
Right.
No, I was a wide receiver. Whenever we just play pickup games, I was good at running patterns and catching passes and running ideally into the end zone. So I want to be a quarterback. Didn't want to be a lineman. I just wanted to be the guy who caught the passes. And when I was asking, we're in the 6th and 7th grade. It wasn't like we were big bruisers. And my father, his father had football injuries that plagued him his whole life. He played in the days when there was no face masks. I mean, he got his nose all smashed up. That's why they moved to Arizona back in the day. So I was penalized for my grandfather's experiences. I was not allowed to play. So I played soccer.
Yeah, and then piano.
And then piano.
You were allowed to play something, just
I was
not.
allowed to play something. You can't play football, but you can play piano. It's almost the same experience.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Yes.
Here's Simon. Hi, Simon.
Yeah.
Well, I'm all in favor of pleasantries and niceties, and it's always nice to do that. But we do actually have a topic. Want to delve into it?
Sure, let's just dive on in.
Well, we have a standing open invitation to you, our listeners, to submit your topics to us. One of our listeners did suggest a topic that sort of runs parallel to an idea of my own. So I thought we'd kick things off with his comment and then proceed to expand into mine. The listener in question is Shell Beckwith, up there in America Junior.
Hello, Shell.
Also known as Canada, eh? You've heard us mention his name many times on the show. He's one of our most loyal and most vocal supporters. At least he was until I made that joke about America Junior. He'll probably never listen to the show again. Actually, that's not my joke. That's Homer Simpson's joke. And I think Shell knows that. So anyways. Well, here's his comment. Here's what Shell said. He said, "Is the antibacterial, bubble-wrapped, helicopter-parented, iPhone-watching kid that we see on the media the norm? Do we need to fear for the future? Or are there really good kids, the leaders of tomorrow out there?" So the American translation would be, are modern parents being too overprotective of their children? Is there a risk of future generations being a little too delicate and a little too coddled to the extent, that's a detriment to society? So what's your initial, impulsive response to that comment by him?
Well, I think everything all around, from my perspective, is that things are much more fear-based, and than they were when we grew up. And I think that it's kind of, it creates fear breeds fear. So I don't think it's necessarily the most positive thing. However, it may be part of evolution. It may go back to the way it was. Who's to say that? I mean, look, when you think about people having lived through the plague and, all of these kind of diseases that run rampant since the beginning of time, we seem to ultimately be able to, yes, maybe there was a genocide of people that it killed, but ultimately, one must persevere and carry on. And I think that the more stuff you live through, the more that fear dissipates. So.
So what you're saying is the plague is a good thing. We need more plagues. Kidding.
No, but if you hadn't had the plague, you wouldn't have had a reason to, to invent penicillin and the antibiotic. But I think there's reason to be fearful when just that very theme in and of itself, the fact that antibiotics, aren't killing certain bacteria and germs anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely something to, the superbugs that are out there these days. They're real, and people don't just get sick for a week or 2 weeks anymore. It can be incredibly daunting and somewhat life-threatening. So, again, there is reason to, it's just all about how you want to approach it.
Well, I think it's interesting that you immediately keyed on the word fear, because what I had written on my list of topics was 2 words: irrational fear. And I'm not saying Shell's thing was about irrational fear. As you just pointed out, these are things we need to be concerned about. But it's interesting that it sort of dovetailed, the 2 ideas dovetailed together. So I wrote them both down. Our generation came up without mandatory car seats or bicycle helmets. And, we rode in cars and we rode bikes and we survived. So, are the protective measures really necessary? You watch old movies from the 40s and everybody's just bopping around loose in their cars. Kids are held on your lap. And, I remember seeing lots of kids in the 70s riding in the beds of trucks all the time. I think I've mentioned on the show before that I was in a very low-speed collision on a very wet day here in Arizona where somebody got cut off and it caused like a 4-car chain reaction. I couldn't stop in time and I hit the car in front of me, and both of my kids were in the car with me. And both were, secured as legally required for their respective ages. And I'm glad they were, because neither one got hurt. It was about like sort of being in a bumper car. I mean, the airbags didn't deploy or anything.
Right.
Jackson was mostly just scared by the impact because he knew it wasn't normal. Zachary, he had a different concern. He heard me call it into 911, and when the police cars started showing up, he asked me, are you going to go to jail? That's what he was afraid of. Since I'd hit this other car, he wanted to know if I was going to be arrested. So, of course, I told him I wasn't. But, so what I'd written down, irrational fear, I wasn't really thinking so much of kids, a little bit of kids, but, fearing something out of proportion to the actual threat. In situations, it's like sort of you've alluded to already, isolated incidents or specific subjects like a disease, but also on the larger scale of just having an overall worldview that is fear-based. Because I've definitely known my share of people who are like that. Their default setting is to be afraid of pretty much everything and everyone. It's funny when you use the phrase helicopter parenting, hovering over your child. I've probably been guilty of that at times. And of course, you're a parent too. But, when you see your child running on tile floor with socks, slip and fall, and then 2 days later, you see them doing the same behavior, it's a legitimate fear because they've already hurt themselves doing it once.
Right.
And, I'd never suggest that kids or adults should be naive or ignorant about the actual dangers in the world. And I understand the idea of better safe than sorry and the wisdom of caution. But I think, I've got some examples I'm going to give of how it can get a little bit extreme. But actually, interestingly, not long after Shell mentioned this, and I thought of it as a possible concept, I had this experience that I want to recount. I was shopping at Target. I really didn't need many items, so I was using a little hand cart, not the full-size one with the wheels. I bought my items. I went out to my car. I was backing out of the parking space. Someone passed very close behind the back of the car. I was paying attention, but the visibility when you're coming out between cars and there's people walking around, a parking lot's like when you're shopping. So, this person walked over to my car window like they wanted to say something to me. And so, my assumption was it was going to be along the lines of, hey, you almost hit me. Why don't you look where you're going? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But this guy didn't really have an angry expression on his face per se, but he wasn't smiling either. His facial expression was kind of neutral, So he just he walked behind my car and walked it to my window. So I made the decision that rather than ignore the guy, I just kind of sighed. I lowered my window halfway down. And so here's what happened. Apparently this guy and the lady he was with, girlfriend, wife, whatever she was, they were in line behind me at the register. And I'd left one of my grocery bags behind. I picked up one bag and left, but the cashier had put my stuff in 2 bags, and I didn't know. So as I was leaving the store, he's yelling at me, "Oh, sir," I didn't hear him, of course. So this guy had seen me get in my car in the parking lot. So the reason he passed so close behind me was, his plan was to come up to my window. He was essentially doing me a favor. He was like, "Hey man, go back in and get the rest of your stuff." So I oh, thanks. I shut the car off. I go back in. I see him go to his car, which is like 2 rows away. So this guy's really gone out of his way. Basically everything he's done has been for my benefit. And because I'm not necessarily a fear-based person, I just rolled down my window. What does this guy have to say? The point being, there's a certain kind of person who always jumps to the most negative conclusion. Like, oh, this guy walking up to my window, he's going to try and panhandle me. I'm going to roll down my window. He's going to punch me. You know what I mean? Their default setting is just to be not trusting and suspicious. And, you mentioned when we started doing the show, we have a show with a male and a female host, so we automatically have differing perspectives. And I know that women sometimes feel more vulnerable in certain situations. So when I tell that story about Target, what comes to mind for you? Some incidents you may remember.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the police, and the excuse that they use of, well, that guy was reaching. I thought he was reaching for a weapon, so that's why I shot him, Yeah. Even if one gets pulled over, it can be kind of traumatizing, because it seems like the opposing person, the cop, always, I guess, in their mind assumes, and maybe they're trained that way, I'm not sure, but they do always suspect the worst, that it could be, and they are acting upon protecting themselves. And if you don't have your driver's license on you and you say, "Oh, it's in the back of my car, let me just reach over," they're like, No, don't reach over.
Yeah.
Don't, ma'am, get out of ma'am, did I tell you that you could?
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, I need you to get out of the car. You need to let me open the car door, and then you can get your purse, or I'll get your purse for you. But things that are authoritative, not only annoy me, but I find them incredibly, you're suddenly in a power struggle of suddenly it's not a free world anymore.
They make you feel like a criminal. They treat you like a criminal because they have to kind of assume that you might be. And then you have to make the concession to realize that very often they do pull someone over who will grab a gun out of the glove compartment, and they have to protect themselves. But instead of sort of being nice about it, they kind of have this vibe about you have to prove to them that you're not a threat to them. So that's a great point, yeah.
And then you can get into the whole thing of whether it's a man or a woman. Like I was with my brother the other day, and we were driving in the car, and I certainly noticed a difference of behavior and treatment in terms of the way they treated him than the way they would a woman. So if it's a guy cop, by the way, the women cops can be just as, they can be even worse, because they've got like a whole, it's not even a macho shtick that they've got on their shoulders. It's like, they are tough. They're like bulldogs, some of them. and they're really exercising a whole interesting, it can be just very interesting in general, the whole authoritative interaction. But I noticed that they treated my brother differently than they did me, and then I've been treated by a cop, and it's not even I wasn't even treated with sometimes they're very nice. It just depends on who you stumble upon. But the police was the first thing that I found to bring up. And the second thing is sometimes when I go into Trader Joe's.
Good old Trader Joe's.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, or even Target. I remember fighting not actually in a fist fight, but I remember I just helped my son build a Dominican Falcon, and I think he was very, very small, and we had literally stayed up all night till the absolute last piece needed to be put together in Lego. and like Chewbacca's bench was missing or something in the Dominican Republic, you know. And I was like, we got right to the last minute, and I was like, and now for the last piece, Chewbacca's bench, and it's nowhere to be found. And I looked at my son, and he's like, Mom, you mean that they're not gonna have the thing finished? And I said, oh, I can't go there. I go, you know what, Mommy's gonna go get another one. So I had our nanny there at the time, of course, and she saw him. I go, Ollie, I'll be right back, and like I'll be as quick as I can. And I got to Target. It was open for 24 hours because it was Christmas and this, that, and the other. And you know, I got there. I got in line. I was able to get it, and then like this lady tried to sort of grab it from me, and then another guy said no, he had it put on hold, and it turned into this whole thing. So yeah, it's really a choice. You come to that place where you go, hey, I'm actually a human being, and so are these other three people, and how are we going to deal with this in an ethical, you know, way that doesn't bring anybody to tears, or where it gets, you know, volatile. You know, because it doesn't have to. So sometimes you really just have to sort of sit with yourself and go, I'm going to make a choice, and I'm going to elect to make the best choice for everyone here. Because sometimes somebody has to be the grown up, you know, and 9 times out of 10, you know, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
And of course, you know, back to Shell's point about being a parent, you know, how do you act when you're alone, and how do you act when your child is with you? You know, you're more likely to be more defensive oriented when your kids are with you. I have to say that the experience I had at Target, even if my kids would have been in the car with me, I would have rolled the window down and heard what the guy had to say. But if my kids would have been with me, I would have had the big cart with the wheels. You know, the bag that I forgot to get, it was like copy paper for my kids to use for homework. Some of the homework they need line paper, some they need copy paper. I don't usually buy one ream of that. So that's what was odd. Well, listening to everything you just said makes me think, number one, have you ever played a female police officer? Well, of course, female. But have you ever played a police officer in your acting career, or that type of thing? I think you've been like a military character before, but
I would. I'd love to.
Yeah, what I want you to do is create one of your little web series characters where you can embody that that cocky female cop, and you can see the world through her eyes, and you can be that person, because I'd just like to see that. Even if you only perform it for me personally. When I'm in Los Angeles between episodes, it would
be funny, right? I think it would be a really good idea, actually.
Yeah, I do. That's one thing I thought of for sure.
I love that show, Reno. What's it called?
Yeah, Reno 911. I've never seen it, but I've heard of it. And,
it's so fun.
Yeah, I could see you doing that kind of a role.
We're moving up in the world. That's what I like to hear.
That's it. I could picture you, because you described it as something you don't like, but I could picture you being a performer, like delivering that.
I have personal experience of being antagonized.
Yeah, you could write the script from memory, all the lines that she said.
Oh yeah, it would come out seamlessly, I'm sure.
Well, along the lines that we've been talking about, I remember hearing in the news there was a Japanese exchange student kind of guy who wasn't from here, he was from Japan, probably high school or college age. I'm going to guess college age. He was trying to go to a Halloween party. Presumably he was in costume. I don't really know. But he had the address wrong. Went to the wrong place. Knocked on the door. People like, who are you? What are you doing at our house? English probably isn't that good. That guy got shot and killed.
No.
The homeowners of that place were so paranoid about a stranger at their door. And the people in Japan were just mystified. How can that happen? And the whole thing about America and violence and guns and everything. But this poor guy makes a mistake of knocking on the wrong door and gets shot and killed. Now, that person living in that house is one of the people I'm talking about, of having a fear-based outlook and a quote-unquote irrational fear. Because I doubt this guy was waving a samurai sword or being threatening in any way. He probably didn't understand the questions being asked of him. They probably said, leave, get off our property. He probably didn't know what it meant. They open the door and blow him away. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous.
There's been so many instances where people have died just, it's happened inadvertently through them being at the wrong place at the wrong time. But more importantly, then when you look into it, and it is a situation like a cop, I don't mean to be cop bashing right now, but, again, I think the overall theme here is fear. When anybody lives in fear, they're not necessarily making rational choices. They're being more irrational than rational. So they're not, you know, their nerves are shot a little bit, right? So they are. It's like it's all kind of closing in on them a little bit.
And I think we understand that you're not bashing all police. And I will say, from my personal experience, there's generally two types that I deal with. One, which is my preference, is the very stoic type, who are just, they're just very factual. My radar said you're going this speed. Here's your ticket. Here's what you can do if you want to go to traffic school, da-da-da-da-da, goodbye. Then you have the other people that swagger over to, particularly when I had long hair and drove hot rods. It was almost like the frickin' sheriff from a Burt Reynolds movie. This guy was like a character, like he wanted everybody driving by to see what he was doing, how he'd pulled over this punk kid in a hot rod. And I was like, dude, just do what you're going to do. And I think the rear window on my car had been taken off so the car could be primered, and the guy hadn't put it back on, or, it was some little tech. He pulled me over because my side rear mirror wasn't there. But instead of just saying that, he put on a big old show. And I felt like it was in a bad, one of those Roadhouse, Grindhouse movies. But
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
next thing I wanted to touch on was airport security. The reason I wanted to bring that up is everybody remembers that shoe bomber guy who got thwarted. He tried to light his shoe on a plane. The passengers prevented him from doing it, and it didn't work. Well, everybody knows now when you go to the airport, you take off your shoes. Hundreds, thousands, maybe millions at this point of shoes have been taken off and screened because the airlines now know there is a possibility of concealing a bomb in your shoe. Likewise, combining liquids. They limit the volume of liquids because they found out some terrorists tried to bring liquids in, then go in the bathroom and combine them to make a bomb. So because of those facts that you can have a shoe bomb and you can make all of us are affected out of fear of that happening. And my question is, could you just screen every fifth or every 10th person for their shoes? I don't want to use the word profiling, because, but can you just look at a certain person and go, this person does not have a frickin' shoe bomb, but they have to be democratic and treat everyone equally. So obviously it way slows down getting to the gate and everything. One thing I like about the tighter security is I remember traveling years ago where anybody could just go right up to the gate. So you'd have a family of 14, well, that's an exaggeration, but you have like 5 or 6 people who weren't actually paying customers waiting at a gate for someone to step off the plane. Now it's a little less congested in the gate areas because you have to be a ticketed passenger. I'm all for airport security, but those particular things, take your shoes off. Why? Because this one shoe bomber guy, don't bring that much toothpaste. Don't bring that much mouthwash. Why? Well, because of this one bomb person. You know that if they just flat out stopped doing that, there are probably, I don't really want to say there'll never be those things happening, but the amount of precautions that are being taken versus the actual risk, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I completely see what you're saying. And again, I don't know. I don't know one security person that I've ever met who's been happy with their job.
Yeah, very true.
And I think it speaks volumes that if you're not doing something that you love, you're not necessarily A, spreading the joy, and B, I mean, a lot of that, what their job requires, the criteria is not, is kind of being intimidating. But I also, you can see past that and see that actually they're not crazy about what they're doing. So it's just always interesting to me, I mean, sometimes it can go very smoothly. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, depending on kind of what region or what part of the country, you're in. People are kind of just a little bit less taking it so damn seriously, because there's that sensibility that they're a human being too, and they're like, yeah, you get that sense that they're like, yeah, I know this is a pain in the ass and everybody's got to do it, and I hate having to do this to you. I'm going to at least be polite, or you come up against people who are completely exercising the authoritative thing and taking it unnecessarily to major limits where they're kind of rubbing your face in it.
Again, they make you feel like a criminal. They make you feel like in their eyes you're guilty. They're going to treat you like you're guilty. And, it's just some family going to, Clearwater, Florida or something. He's like, why am I suddenly a terror suspect? The other thing I want to say is, right now my car is locked. It's not because I think anybody's going to steal my car. It's a precaution we take. My house is locked. A lot of people have security systems. And the truth is, if I didn't lock my car and didn't lock my house, I would say chances are probably 99% that nobody would go in my house or go in my car.
Yeah.
Part of that is because they assume it is locked. If it became a law that no one could lock their car, no one could lock their house, and everybody knew ahead of time, it's a little different. But I'm just saying is it rational to assume someone's going to steal your car, someone is going to break into your house? It depends on what neighborhood you live in. It depends on, I have a friend, her daughter brought a friend to the house, and the friend of a friend who was with them was some sketchy character. Their house got robbed like 3 days later, and they figured, well, the daughter's friend's friend, who just some guy who just came and saw the place, said, oh, I'll come back later and rob them. There's special circumstances. Again, I'm trying to speak in broad general terms about our basic mindset. This is a good example of knowing you're probably not going to have someone get in your car, but it's not hard to lock it. So it's an easy thing to do to lock your car, but I don't lock my car because I really think anybody's going to get into it. Well, then again, when my briefcase and my wallet and my laptop are in there, if I'm running into Trader Joe's myself, yeah, somebody can look in there, see something, open the window, grab it. But I'm just saying in general terms, if everybody listening tonight to the show tonight left your house open and didn't lock your car, I'll bet you 99% chance you wake up in the morning, no home invasion, car still there. So it's just a matter of the mindset, the outlook. And then again, I live in a suburban area. Maybe if I lived in an urban area or a crime-ridden area, I would have a different feeling about it. Just trying to make a point about, basically what I'm basically saying is that when I say irrational fear as opposed to fear, if you're tottering on the top of a 7-story bridge, you should be afraid, But the other thing I wanted to mention, when we had Bernard Rose on the show, and we were talking about the horror genre and his film Candyman, because we're talking about fear and we're talking about irrational fear. You'll watch a movie like Candyman and suddenly be afraid to do something you never even thought about before. Say the guy's name however many times, or you'll go see the movie Jaws, and you've enjoyed swimming in the ocean your whole life. You don't want to go in the water anymore because that's in your head now. Or great example, Hitchcock's Psycho. There's a ton of women who stopped taking showers after seeing that movie because a woman is murdered with a knife in the shower, and now they take baths instead because when those images enter your mind of a shark eating a swimmer, or someone being stabbed in the shower, or, the Candyman. It's irrational to think, well, just because I saw that movie, I'm not going to go upstairs and the Candyman's going to be there. I'm not going to suddenly have these problems, but those are powerful images.
I do really believe that saying that we become our thoughts. And we really do. I mean, it's not just a kind of law of attraction thing that's a fad that's sort of, flying around at the moment. I think it's been the case since the dawn of time, and I think it's a very insightful way of looking at the psyche and the power of the brain that we have, that, we really have the capacity to rewire the matrix if we want. I think that it doesn't matter how, I think you can sort of say, okay, by such and such an age, I'm just too obstinate in my thinking, and so therefore, if I haven't changed by now, I'm never going to change, or other people may view you never being able to change. But the brain is just, we use such a small part of it in comparison to what's the amount of it that's really there, and again, it's a powerful thing. And so whatever penetrates it, whatever saturates it, whatever we choose to, it's like you hear people say, be careful who, pick people that you want to be around, that you feel that you would like to be like, or who have qualities that you'd like to be like, because energy is also contagious, and so. Yeah, I mean, anything you eat, anybody you're around, anything you watch, if you're around fear-based people all the time, it's going to start to affect the way you perceive yourself and your environment. And, again, it's all subjective to ultimately how you want to, digest it and take it on board.
Very true. And, it's funny, I have my little outline here. As usual, people know Olivia doesn't know the topic till we start to record. It's funny how many things you've said are kind of paraphrased over here in my outline. Like I had written down psychological vulnerability. It shows you how vulnerable we are psychologically, how easy it is for something to get into our head. I think another huge factor in all this is the way news is presented. 95% of what gets reported in a news broadcast is bad, scary stuff. They say, well, a college campus was the scene of a shooting today. Well, that's a news story. And if you go out and say, well, thousands and thousands of college campuses were not the scene of a shooting today, that's not a news story. You don't hear very many reports along the lines of all is well. Like, today the campus was fine. Nobody got hurt or anything. So if you watch the news every night, you start to color that. I think one of the benefits of social media and the internet is there's the existence of and the potential for a lot more positive content being added into the mix. You see a lot of the sort of feel-good stories that people want to share, and it balances it out, I think. The thing I think is a little strange is a lot of people will show those little videos of somebody being nice to someone else, and they'll kind of portray it as like a rare thing, as if most people are going to do the wrong thing. Oh, look, this is one time where people did the right thing, which I honestly believe is not the case. I think most people in the world are decent and fair-minded, and I think we experience this in our lives all the time. Because if everybody was as jaded as the cynics would like you to believe, there'll be school shootings all day, every day, everywhere. We're not as bad as we're sometimes depicted. We've had that experience. Hear about this and that and the other, and you get in a situation with a bunch of strangers, and you find, I've been in situations where I've seen a woman drop $20 on the ground, and a homeless dude who could totally use it picks it up and hands it to her and says, "Here, you drop this." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So your assumptions you have about people. Another case in point, we touched on this a little bit with Bernard Rose. Your industry, film and TV, in the interest of dramatic tension, the stakes have to be heightened and raised to be considered entertaining. I mean, Nicole Wallace, she wasn't a serial shoplifter, for example, And we all know that inhuman monsters like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, they do exist, but they're not common. And works of fiction like Dexter or Sons of Anarchy, where there's a lot of brutal violence, we're supposed to be able to disassociate that from real life. I mean, can you imagine like if there was a place called Charming and bodies were dropping the way they do on that show? You know what I mean? It would not be just one or two of them would be enough. There's like they'll knock off 8 or 9 people a week on that show, and we know that it's entertainment, and of course you're involved in entertainment. And Seinfeld was the show about nothing, where they do a half-hour show about junior mints or something. But most shows, it's the stakes have to be high. It has to be life or death, and somebody pushing somebody else isn't good enough. They have to punch them and they have to bleed and that kind of stuff. And so it's interesting how in entertainment this factors in too. I also mentioned Jaws, and if you prey on the fear of the audience. And everything. I know you've done a lot of roles where things are all heightened and everything, and I know you've done a lot of roles where things are very realistic, and I know you've done a lot of roles that are just pure comedy, just for laughs. Wayne's World too. So, how would you? And I actually asked you when you and I first spoke, when you were on my other show. I said, "What if your character is not afraid of snakes, but you personally are the actor?" And then they go, "All right, well, they put a snake around your neck. Go do the scene." You know what I mean? So fear has to play a role in some of your work. I'm sure there have been dangerous situations you've been in as a result of your work. How do you handle it?
Every time you ask me that snake question, I don't know why, but I go seriously foggy, and I just feel like I just went through one ear and out the other. I just had a flashback, first of all, to the very first interview that we did, and I know I didn't answer it that time, and I don't know how much better I'm going to do.
Okay, let's make it spiders. Let's make it anything that you're personally afraid of, but you're playing a character that's not.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, well, I can give you a perfect case scenario in that regard. Because I had that very experience. I was doing a film called The Enemy, and I was playing a CIA agent. And I as Olivia, have serious vertigo. Like, I'm terrified of heights.
Okay.
But funnily enough, I was playing a woman who didn't. I mean, it was part of her job, and I had to go up with a rifle and I was armed and like I had a target to hit, and I'm up a very, very tall building, a scaffolding, in fact, and it was pretty cool. I was with Roger Moore, and he said, "It's all right, darling. Just hold my hand." And It'll be fine. If you get squirmy or panic, just look over at me and we'll lock eyes and we'll stare. You know.
He just wanted to hold your hand, hon.
It's like, okay. But funnily enough, I didn't even have to lock. I didn't even need to lock eyes with him or hold his hand. Like once I got up there, I was like, no, I'm Penny Bloody McKinney.
Right, you pretend to be the character, but it's still it's pretend though.
I'm gonna step into this woman, and she's a different person than I am, and Penny's okay with this, so Olivia's gonna be okay with this.
Right, because most of us listening don't have that experience where we have to do something as a character.
Yeah, but it suddenly gave me this incredible liberty to just totally, just get over my fear, and in fact, after that experience, I tried it on for size to see if in actuality I could use some reverse psychology with myself. And so I went up to the Eiffel Tower a few years later and I just kind of pretended I was somebody else and I was fine. So it actually helped me get over my fear of heights.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of the power of the mind and how we become our thoughts, or we can make a choice to psych ourselves out. Once, it's kind of like comparatively, if you have, like, let's say a lot of arrested development and you've had stuff that's happened to you as a child, and you meet people whose psyche has split in three, you know what I'm saying? And then but if you have enough, if you even have 1% of adult that's present, so that those parts of those children or parts of you that have been bruised or broken earlier on are running the show most of the time, but you have 1% adult. A very famous therapist once said, if you only have 1% adult, that's enough to guide you where you can shift things to be able to keep the girls and boys at bay, where the adult is actually taking over and says, I got you girls, or I've got you boys. You know what I mean? I've got you. You don't have to be scared right now. I'm stepping in.
That's interesting. Back on an episode that I did just with Tom, where I talked about my hand, I think we called it "It's Never Okay to Peek." That was a reference to when I had to do a closed MRI, and I'd had experiences where I was claustrophobic 2 or 3 times, and I talked about that. And they put me in the little tube, and I was going to be in there for 50 minutes. And I didn't want to be in there for 50 seconds. And the way I handled it was mind over matter. I mean, I told myself I'm doing it for my kids because this might be the only way to find out what's wrong with me. I don't want to do it, but I have to take that 1%, like you just said, and let that be in control. And I got up in the tube and I realized I had to relax. So I let my arms touch the side, which told my mind how small it was in there. And I just closed my eyes and thought of wide spaces and thought about them and got through it. I actually had to go back a second time, which sucked. And the real thing that really sucked is it turned out that I didn't have a pinched nerve or anything. I didn't need the MRI at all. Once I saw a specialist, it was like a nerve issue, and I didn't even need to do it. But that would be my comparison to the heights. I'm not cool with heights either. I don't ever want to go skydiving. I don't ever want to. I had a chance to parasail at Lake Tahoe. I thought, when the boat pulls you and you're like on a parachute or whatever, and you're like flying behind the boat about 50 feet over the water or something. But I guess I looked young at the time. I was like 22, and they didn't believe I was even 18. I didn't have any ID with me. I had to prove to them I was 21 or 18 probably. Oh, wow. I was like 21. And I didn't have any proof of it, and they didn't believe me. So, Well, I'm sure everybody listening has a lot of opinions about all this, and I want to thank Shell for suggesting this.
Thank you, Shell.
And I have other directions I could take it into, and in the future we probably will. But the way I want to wrap this thing up is, I mentioned the news, and I have a little closing piece here. It's a pretty interesting and unique mashup by an artist named Mark Gunderson, who goes by the alias Evolution Control Committee. What he did was, in order to illustrate the negative bias and impact of a typical evening news report, he took Dan Rather's voice and he just pulled out certain words, the negative kind of terms that they sort of key on in a typical evening news broadcast, and they set it to a beat, a version of an AC/DC beat, actually. At times it sounds like AC/DC, at times it doesn't. But CBS, initially, they felt it made them look bad. it could be any network, but it was Dan Rather, so it was CBS. They tried to censor it and have it wiped from the internet, and they weren't happy about it. Everybody knows what the internet's like. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
It was sort of in the earlier days of the internet. It was a while ago, but because Dan Rather's been retired for quite a while. But when Dan Rather did retire, well, guess what they played at his retirement party? They played that. So suddenly it was funny. Ha ha, hypocrites. They were all offended by it, but then when they wanted to tease him, they played it. So I think it's pretty good. So, that's what we're going to do to close this out. We're going to play that for everybody. And again, thanks to Shell and thanks to Robert Lang for engineering the session. And give this a listen and then come on our Facebook page or our Twitter and tell us your feelings about irrational fear and antibacterial bubble-wrapped, helicopter-parented, iPod using, whatever, all the stuff he said, kind of kids. Because he had the kid angle. He was concerned about kids. I expanded it. My own topic was just going to be irrational fear in general, which touches on kids and not. But I think people are going to find this kind of interesting. And this is a situation where the closing music does relate to the topic. So let's give it a listen. And nice to be with you again, my dear. And
lovely as always.
And see everybody next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, buddy. Bye-bye.
This is the CBS Evening News. With Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Danger, war, killer, fraud, CIA, mayhem, crisis, horrible, inflation, military threat, the flaming debris, fatal heart attack, stress injuries, prison disaster, economic collapse, dangerous radiation, a tide of violence and human misery, a liar and an unremorseful killer. Communist international smuggling pipeline, starving victims, and how they die. Chemical weapons, carpet bombing, deaths, tough FBI, kill and injure children, police conspiracy, negative attacks, discipline, sex and drinking binges, dying of a heart attack, dying of breast cancer, dying of a Japanese nuclear bomb, mountains of credit card debt, the mountain of cocaine, tons of cocaine, atomic bomb radiation experiments, unwitting test subjects, dangerous radiation, marijuana abuse, hooked on drugs. Time for us to bug out. Rocked by rape. Rocked by rape. Rocked by rape. Sex, drugs, and rocked by rape. Nazi war criminals, cancer, garbage, murder, caution, terrorist, castigation, police conspiracy, dramatic urban torture, drunk driving, hostage siege, government shutdown, collapses, desperation, despair, deep into debt, criminal, persecuted, semi-automatic handgun, explosive gunman killed a tourist, funeral victims, racist massive lawsuit, hostage, ethnic war, cancer death rate fleeing for their lives, CIA narcotics operations, hungry, homeless, frustrated terrorists, spoiled, unsanitary, hard-hitting losers, brutal, bizarre, critical bombing, the gang's ruin, criminal, anti-government love triangle, deeper and deeper into damage, even death, anti-drug DEA, worldwide ban. Time for us to bug out. Rocked by rape, rocked by rape, rocked by rape, sex, drugs, and rocked by rape. Disgruntled conspirator attack, killed. U.S. warplane went down in flames, crash, gunned down, shooting death, blood drops, murderer. Desperate tragedy, isn't he dead? Death penalty, ransom note, forbidding notorious, overwhelming communist urban punishment, low ethics, extortion and murder. A plane crash set an entire neighborhood on fire. International smuggling pipeline. Make it faster, better, cheaper. Health risk, criminal, murdering a man, tough diplomatic hell on earth. Magnetic radiation, fraudulent assassins, mysterious murder, chemical terrorism, military targets, fatal crash, danger. The freak accident, no known survivors. Wild and woolly semi-automatic truck bomb. Emergency anti-fatal shooting rampage. Notorious negative police brutality. Fear, the hidden Nazis next door. Marxist rebels, serious murderer, accidents, problems, punitive damages, like that negative, heart-wrenching controversy. Time for us to bug out. Rocked by rape. Rocked by rape. Rocked by rape. Sex, drugs, and rocked by rape. Bug out. And that's part of our world tonight. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Good night, and have a great weekend.